Good morning, everyone. Welcome to UUCC, the UU Church of Canandaigua. I'm Eileen, I'm your minister, and I'm so glad to be with you this morning. As we begin our service, I have a few quick announcements to share with you. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to share my screen. I want to let you know, if you haven't already signed up, you can still sign up. This is the last announcement for this particular event for Pixar Theology Sacred Memory. We're going to watch Pixar's Coco, which is available on some streaming platforms and also in DVD and Blu-ray at the Wood Library and lots of local libraries. And then we will meet on the 24th from 6 to 7 p.m. over Zoom to talk about the theological themes of death, memory, and tradition. So if you'd like to join that, all are welcome to join us. There will be a link for sign up in the chat momentarily. There will also be a link to sign up for the Common Read book group that's going to be facilitated by Lynn Overgard. We'll be reading Breathe, A Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry, which is a common read that you use across the country, are reading this year together and then discussing in small groups. That small group discussion is going to take place on Zoom April 6th, 6:30 to 8 in the evening. And if you want to join that, then you can find that link, like I said, in our chat. If you want to be part of a group book order, reach out to Danielle and Thomas Lyon. I believe they're going to place a group book order if they haven't already. And then I want to let you know, some of you have already received, and many of you will be soon receiving, some Easter care packages that pertain to our Easter service on April 4th. It's going to be a great service. We've got a virtual choir. We've got some very cool music happening. There are bubbles. If you think you might not be in our directory as one of our members or friends, but you're coming to worship even very occasionally, email me. That's my email address on the screen, to let me know your address so we can get you one of these care packages. We really want everyone to have one. And that is the end of my announcements. I'm going to now turn us over to Lynn Overgard, who has a stewardship announcement for us. Oh, Lynn, you are muted. Let's work on getting you unmuted. Let's see. I can help. There we go.
Hold that down. Oh, okay.
There it is.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And I have news about our pledge drive, and I have a poster that shows how far we are getting, which is very far. We are about a little more than 2/3 of the way toward our goal of $65,000. We have 51,760 at this point, and the pledge campaign would like to be finished. We would like to finish by the end of March, and so if you have not pledged yet, there's still plenty of time, and many thanks to those of you who have.
Thank you, Lynn. And with that, let's take a deep breath in as we enter a space of worship. Let's light our chalices together. If you have a home chalice or any old candle, let's light them now, and we'll recite our chalice lighting words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in the celebration of the life we share together. So my older child is turning 5 next week. And last year, when his long hoped for Harry Potter party quickly shifted into a cake over FaceTime with his grandparents, I assured him he'd have his real birthday party in just a few weeks, a month or two at most, probably during the summer when it was warmer and nicer out. And now we're preparing him for another pandemic birthday, a whole trip around the sun we've done in this strange new reality. And my younger child, well, he's spent approximately 2/3 of his life in isolation. This is not the world we thought we'd be living in, is it? And that's the primary way grief hits us. It's like opening the door to your house, expecting to see all your homey and comfortable things inside, and finding you've walked into a strange land instead. I really think that this is why we come to church. Here we make room for one another's heartache. We hear the joys and sorrows of our beloved's hearts, and we promise them we are with you every Sunday. We look at the world and we see that it is absolutely delightful and absolutely heartbreaking. And whether we are holding hands or watching screens, here in this space, we make room for all the complicated feelings that come with being human. You are all here today, and you all hold in your heart so many complicated things. Whatever you hold is so welcome here today. I'm glad you're with us, and I'm glad we're with you, whatever you're holding. Come and worship with us today. Let's sing our first hymn together, Abide with Me. And now it is time for a story. And I'm going to tell you the story, but I'm going to turn the spotlight back over to Bill and Pat, who are in our church building, because today is the first full day of spring. And it's time to turn the wheel of our seasons to celebrate the spring equinox. Our story is about Sylvie. Sylvie was a seed. At first, everything she knew was comfort and peace. She basked in the summer heat as she sat beside her dozens of sisters, held gently by their mother. Their mother would turn them toward the bright sun as it moved across the sky, soaking up rays of warmth and light. Then Sylvie noticed the hours spent in sunlight started to grow shorter. One afternoon, a couple of her mother's petals fell to the ground far, far below. And the next day, a few more. Soon they all dropped down. And then the unthinkable happened. Sylvie's sisters started falling too, just the ones on the outer edges at first. And then more and more, until only Sylvie was left. Sylvie hung on to her only home with all her might. She was determined to survive. But one cool afternoon, a strong gust of wind rushed through the garden, and Sylvie was swept to the cold, hard earth. She cried to leave her home. I suppose this is it for me, she thought. Surely I will die soon. And her little husk was covered over with fallen leaves and twigs. Everything was dark. She stayed still in the frozen darkness for what seemed like many lifetimes. This is the end of the world, thought Sylvie. Nothingness is all there is. But we are not seeds, and we know things that Sylvie did not yet understand. One day, during this long age of darkness, Sylvie felt something stirring within her. A great energy was building up inside. She stretched slowly and hesitantly. Somewhere inside, she sensed the warm sun was shining above once again. She reached for it, just the way her mother always had. And in reaching, she burst out of the soil and into the light. Day by day, she stood taller and taller, and the light grew stronger, and so did Sylvie. Sylvie was a seed, and then she was a sunflower. This is the end of our story. And I would like to invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. In this congregation, we promise one another that in the service of the values that unite us, we will recognize the inherent value in each person, foster a community of compassion and caring for all, value our diverse opinions, and engage respectfully in all our interactions. It is your gifts, your generosity that funds the good work of this community. And this morning, we share a quarter of our gifts with the National Women's Hall of Fame, our monthly designated offering recipient. You can give today by visiting our website through the link in the chat, or by mailing a check to 3024 Cooley Road in Canandaigua, or by setting up an automatic offering through your bank. And in any of those cases, if you make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering, then we can be sure to share a quarter of it with our service partner. And now I would like to spotlight our friend Val to tell us a little about stewardship.
Okay, basically telling how I happened to join the Unitarian Church. It was the 1960s, folks. Everything was happening: civil rights, integration, feminism, just about anything you could think of. And we had young children that we wanted to grow up in a more liberal church than we were presently at. A couple of couples in the neighborhood. We all started looking around, and we noticed as we went to rallies or demonstrations or to meetings that we saw many of the same people, many of the same leaders. And when we found out that most of them were also located in the Unitarian or Universalist church, that was the church that we chose to join. We were going to change the world. Well, kind of. We changed some things. And then before we knew it, we'd become sort of unchurched, still Unitarians. But then I was in my 60s and things had changed. Kids were grown up. I was retired. I was widowed. And I realized I needed some more liberal friends or more liberal support. And my neighbor walked across the street. My neighbor happened to be Dorothy Grutton. And Dorothy said, "Oh, you should come to church with us on Sunday. Matt and I are speaking." Matt was her teenage son then. And they were debating. She had been criticizing some of his violent video games. And he looked at the book she was reading, which happened to be a crime drama. And he said, "Hey, Mom." So they had a discussion. I said, "Oh, is it going to be at night?" She said, "No, it's during church time." So I was impressed with that. And I spent the summer going and enjoying the parishioners participating so well, as they do still in our church. And that impressed me. And I was even impressed, Maureen, when you and Carl came back, and have been impressed with ministers since then. So this lovely combination in this small little church in Canandaigua really appealed to me and many of my friends. I've made wonderful friends, had lots of support from this group. We're very unique and special and deserve all the support we can get. Thanks. Oh, the music. Now, I'm not saying I just come for the music, but that's one of the reasons too. Thanks, everybody, for being such a wonderful, supportive congregation. Thanks.
Thank you, Val. And you can find, again, in the chat, Pat Mel's email address. And if you'd like to make an annual pledge to support the church or to ask questions about stewardship, you can reach out to Pat. And I thank you, big or small, for your generosity this morning. Let's take a deep breath in together as we prepare for a time of centering, followed by shared silence. Get comfortable in your seat. Let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Let your jaw be soft. Give your attention to your own body. Let your eyes fall closed if that's what they need to do. Will I ever walk through a crowd without panic jumping into my throat, or hold a stranger's hand while he suffers, as I have done so many times before, without wondering shamefully what microbes linger on his skin? Will the weight of the millions ever cease to lay heavy on my shoulders, even as I walk out again into the blinding sunlight of a new world? How can we sing the old songs in a strange land? I lift my eyes to the hills. From where will our help come? Will we always see there the weighty fog of loss, the invisible foe, ever lurking on that horizon? The ghosts of each needless, heedless death haunt our bright tomorrow. Will this valley always hold the shadow of death in its fields? A new day dawns, but still we sit by the river and weep.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart of the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Truths hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
This is your trigger warning, maybe a little late in the service, but this is not a happy, slappy day for us here at UUCC. That's not what this morning is about. I think after 3 years, toxic positivity is the last thing y'all expect from me. But just in case, this is your trigger warning. We're going to be real today. We've lived through a year of global pandemic, a racial reckoning that is only just beginning, the rising tide of fascism and organized white supremacy, an actual terrorist coup. And you don't have to watch if it's too hard, but I hope you will. You'll almost definitely feel some big feelings today, be a bit uncomfortable. I hope you will. Because being uncomfortable through all this means we're processing the trauma while we're living it, instead of bottling it up to pop open on us later when we least expect it. And I think that's good. We have memorials when someone dies for a reason, not because they need it, not in our theology, to have peace in their soul or make their way to the right afterlife or anything, but because we need it. We who are left here, we need to process loss as it happens, spiritually honor it, make meaning out of senseless grief. So we mark the time with ritual when someone passes. We place a limen, a threshold in our hearts, delineating the before time and the after. We look for meaning when we lose someone so that we can go on living. So what the hell do we do when we lose 2.5 million someones? I'm going to be very honest. I don't know. I don't know the right answer. They did not train us for this moment in seminary. I rest confidently only in the knowledge that none of us know. None of us know what the hell we're doing or how we should be coping. So here we are. We're trying. We're standing in that liminal space between pandemic and after pandemic. And together, we're marking the trauma. We are marking the trauma. We're honoring the loss so that we can go on living. And we are singing praises for our good fortune. Because if we're sitting here together a year later, it is by the grace of fortune. But it's not just the nearly uncountable deaths that we need to grieve, to mark, to honor. There is so much that has shifted for us this year. So much loss and change and mourning. President Biden frequently talks about this idea of the empty chair. You've maybe heard it. There's an empty chair at too many tables where a person ought to be. And I think there are empty chairs now in so many corners of our lives where we've lost more than just our people. We've lived in deep anxiety for ourselves and for others. And that fear represents lost cognitive and emotional function that we would have spent elsewhere this year. We've lived in isolation and lived with the loss of contact of our dearest ones, or without even the everyday goodwill of strangers and acquaintances. We have lived in close proximity to our housemates without the outlet of other in-person relationships, and we have tested the tensile strength of those partnerships. We have lost the ability to gather together as a church, to break bread together. Grief is not an Olympic sport. There are no points for the biggest loss. Loss itself is actually immeasurable. The vastness of the loss of life this year doesn't discount the pain wrought by the loss of ordinary, everyday connections either. Being able to kiss your grandchild's squishy cheeks, going to the movies, everyone crammed around a Thanksgiving table chatting merrily, scooting up close to your best friend in the cafeteria to study together. These matter too. These losses matter because they matter to us. Social intimacy is so fundamentally central to our humanity. And it does us a great disservice to pretend the loss of that is not enormous on our hearts. Grief, like love, is infinite, and there is enough of it to cover all our losses, big and small. I want to name, too, the rage that has coursed through so many of us this year. The pandemic is a natural phenomenon, but it has laid bare a system of unnatural cruelty, a system that is responsible for so many of those millions of deaths, for putting industry before life, profit before safety, where the already vulnerable among us, Black and brown siblings, people with disabilities, our elders, heard people in power discount the value of their lives this year over and over again. It is what underlies the racial reckoning we see emerging across society. We are all too aware that much of our pain is not, like coronaviruses, part of the glorious web of life. It is a result of devaluing that web, of the thinly veiled lie that we are separate, that we don't breathe the very same air. And we make room today for that rage too. That is a part of grief. Last year, at about this time, what I said to you was that lament is not a sin. And I want us to live into that today. Failing to find purpose or positivity in our pain is not actually a failure. You are allowed to yell at God or the cosmos or the spirit of life. The Psalms are full of rants at God. Jesus yelled at God before he was executed. Lament is the one thing we can do when we give up the notion that we can do everything, control anything. Lament, shaking our fist at the universe, is a deep acknowledgement that we are not the boss of this place. And that makes room for grace. The beauty of lamentation, the grace of lamentation, of making space for our grief, is that the shouting and raging and crying becomes its own song of grace. The writers of the Psalms, living as slaves in exile, wrote down the fury of their pain. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? They wept. And we read that today because it became itself the song they sang together. So I want us to hold one another in the song of our grief this morning. I want to invite you into a ritual time together to mark what we have lost. So I'm going to turn my camera so that you can see this bowl. First, I want to remind us that we have lost 2,663,000 people's lives to COVID-19 around the world this year, and that each of those people mattered. They had no less worth or dignity or value than any other person. And so we hold their deaths heavy on our hearts. This cup holds approximately 1 grain of sand for each person who died. I did some rough math. I promise I did not count them. And as I pour it here, we offer a moment of silence in reverence for all those lives cut short. This year has brought more than just the loss of life. Our daily lives have been changed as well. So as I light this first candle, I ask you to share in the chat the changes to your everyday life that you have lived with this year. The small, ordinary losses that may not feel so small in your heart. Learning how to come to church differently. Or they might feel enormous in your heart. Losing a job or a home. What changes have you personally experienced? What losses are you living with? I invite you to share now in the chat. The whole world has changed in this past year in so many ways. Major shifts are happening. Injustice has been unveiled like it never was before. And as I light the second candle, I invite you to share some big scale change of our world, loss that's communal that you carry on your heart today. Some of the changes we've experienced this year, we will gladly carry with us forever. I invite you to name, as I light the final candle, what, if anything, from this hard year you will carry with you with love and gratitude into the future. This has been a hard year of immeasurable loss. And still, like seeds under the earth, here we are, surviving in all the sorrows and all the joys that we hold today and for the rest of our days. Even across great distances, we are with one another. May it be so, and amen.
In the toughest time you ever knew, the only thing that you could do was carry the flame. Sickness spreading through the land, you held your spirit in your hands, carried the flame. Storms and sorrows gathered round, you raised your head and you stayed your ground. You carried the flame through endless days of the hardest living. You kept on loving, kept on giving, you kept on. You carried the flame, carry the flame. Raise it high, send its beacon through the sky. Keep it strong, shining through the pain. Let it rise and let it grow. Let it light the world, you know. Let it glow. Carry the flame. At last, we take on the spark you passed. Carry the flame. From hand to hand, we send it on, the kindling hope of a rising dawn. In us all, we carry the flame. Carry the flame, raise it high. Send its beacon through the sky. Keep it strong and shining through the pain. Let it rise and let it grow. Let it light the world, you know. Let it glow. Carry the flame. We are nurses, doctors, teachers. We are children, parents, preachers, and we all carry the flame. We are scientists and cargo packers, farmers, singers, grocery stackers, young and old. We carry the flame. Carry the flame, raise it high. Send its beacon through the sky. Keep it strong and shining through the pain. Let it rise and let it grow. Let it light the world, you know. Let it glow. Carry the flame. Let it glow. Carry the flame.
Thanks to UU Minister Dan Schatz for writing that song. Let us close with these words. Our grief deserves a place There is room for our grief, here and wherever we go. There is room for our grief, even beside our gratitude, even hand in hand with peace. Even after all this time, there is room for our grief. Our grief deserves a place. Let's sing together our closing hymn, Part in Peace.
Part in peace, the day before us. Praises sing for life and light. Are the shadows lengthening o'er us? Past thy care, who guards the night. Part in peace with deep thanksgiving, rendering as we homeward tread, love and service to the living, gentle memory to the dead. Part in peace, our voices raising, in thy presence always be. This the worship and the praises, bringing peace to you and me.
I'm going to ask you, if you're able, to change your screen to gallery view. There's probably an option in the upper right-hand corner of your screen so that we can see one another as we extinguish our flames today. And we say these words: we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for gathering together today.